Good afternoon and welcome back to It's All Interesting. I am your host, Clifford Merin, and today I am excited to be joined by my old-time buddy, Steven Mazzacane of Brantford7.com, as well as StevenMazzacane.com. He's got his finger on the pulse in Connecticut, particularly the shoreline. Steven, so good to see you. How are you?
Great to be here, Cliff. How are you?
I am great. So we got 2 points of order here today, and we'll start with the most important and the second
Yeah,
most important. Most important being our New York Knicks
yeah.
starting out their season today against the Boston Celtics. We'll get into politics about that. Knicks had quite an offseason, bringing in Mikal Bridges, question marks with him during the preseason. Karl Anthony Towns. Stephen, where do you see our Knicks for the 24-25 season?
Well, first of all, to those who are not aware, today is a national holiday. The start of NBA season should be celebrated as such. A diehard Knicks fan for a long time, and if you're Cliff, you know this. If you're a Knicks fan, you've suffered for a very, very long time. '99 we had a little burst of going to the finals, but injuries derailed us. We had a couple little blips with Carmelo, but we've always, quite frankly, sucked for forever. And so this is an amazing level of, wait a minute, we're a contender. I think we're third in the betting Vegas numbers to win a title. So behind the Celtics and the Thunder. So really kind of impressive. So it's a holiday for me.
It's
But yeah,
a
I
it's
mean
a
tonight,
weird feeling being mentioned having the Knicks as a contender.
I
Um,
I don't know
Even when
what
they
this
had
is.
Carmelo, I never really felt like they were
No,
on the ball to win a title.
no, you had that one team with Carmelo where you had Stoudemire, you had Tyson Chandler, you had who was Defensive Player of the Year that year. But you really, even Carmelo never struck you as the lead you to a title kind of guy. He was exciting, he could win games, but Brunson does. Like Brunson looks like he's the guy that's like in the gym constantly, getting better constantly. The Knicks made moves that were very specific to beating the Celtics. And it's not just we want to be a better team. They said, how do we take on the Celtics? Have two great wings, and they're two. What's it? Tatum and what's his name?
Brown.
And they have Porzingis, who's injured all the time, but makes a huge difference. They have very very good defensive players. So the Knicks went and said, okay, we have Julius Randle, not a great defensive player, needs the ball a lot. Let's make that trade, get Karl Anthony Towns, who is the best 3-point shooting big man in basketball. Maybe Embiid has an argument there, but that's pretty close. And you have two of the best defensive wings now. And so even if Bridges isn't great offensively, he is a shutdown defender. And OG Anunoby is a shutdown defender. So you're going to have a hard time at the end of games scoring when every defender's arms are 6 inches longer than yours. And you have, I argue, he was second team, so that means he was the top 10, 12 player in the NBA last year. Brunson, the second half of the year, may have been the MVP last year. So I think there's, for the first time in a very, very long time, we have the defensive team that Tom Thibodeau wants to coach, and you have the all-star player that you want the ball in his hands at the end of games, and last year came through again and again and again. This could be a really, really interesting season. In fact, I think their over/under on wins was 54.5. I bet the over. I
I
actually like
didn't.
them.
Yeah, and I didn't understand the post Karl Anthony Towns trade that there was negativity towards that. I understand DiVincenzo, fan favorite, had a
Mhm.
great year with the Knicks, was so vital in the playoffs with the playoff run. But you're basically trading a guy who is a very, very important role player on a team and Julius Randle, who did not fit in really at all. And I think that was apparent as the season went on last year for a future Hall of Famer, probably top three, four big man in the entire league.
Mhm. I agree. And also remember something: losing Hartenstein. Mitchell Robinson is a spectacular defensive player, and he gets a lot of offensive rebounds. But one of the reasons he gets a lot of offensive rebounds, he doesn't leave the paint. So when you have a center that can't leave the paint, and you have drivers in Brunson, in OG, and in Bridges that want to get to the paint, that's a problem. You need space. So by having a 3-point shooter as a center, that fit is absolutely perfect for Brunson. It's just I don't know how you guard Brunson one on one now. He can get to the basket because there will be space, and he's surrounded by 3-point shooters. It's going to be a very difficult defensive assignment to cover the Knicks this year. Randall as a career, I think 31, 32% 3-point shooter, and he was ball dominant. He was a good passer as a big man, but he was ball dominant. And when you have a point guard that runs the show, it's hard to coexist with a ball dominant forward. So I think the ball's going to move a ton this year. I think that paint's going to be open. Brant, I think Brunson, even as a guard, was one of the top paint scorers in basketball last year. That little
I
baby
think
turnaround
now,
thing he does. And that's only going to go up. I don't see how people stop him when you have the center and Karl Anthony Towns standing out there by the line. I mean, he's going to be open all day for three. If he's hot, we're going to be a hard team to beat. And so, look, we saw it last year with the Celtics. The Celtics had 5 guys on the court who could shoot threes. We also now have 5 guys on the court who can shoot threes. And that's the way the NBA is going. And I think we're probably one of 3 or 4 teams that can actually put that on the court at any given time. So I'm excited. Long season, but
so on that point, so I'm looking at the East. You got the Celtics, Knicks, Bucks, and Sixers. I think that's the top 4 in the East. I think it would be difficult to argue anything else. The real question is the Celtics, you put them, they're obviously number 1 in the class, the defending champs. Then you have the Knicks, Bucks, and Sixers. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of there's no way the Sixers are going to stay healthy, and there's no way the Bucks are going to stay healthy. So really, I mean, look, obviously it's October. Everybody's team is the best team in the league on this
yeah.
day. But the Bucks and the Sixers, aging stars, always injured stars between George and Embiid. Obviously, Maxey, different category. And then with the Bucks, Dame and Giannis, the Knicks have way more depth, I think, than either of those 2 teams. And the Knicks more so are built to compete with the Celtics more than those 2 teams. Do
So I
you
agree
agree?
on the second one. So I don't know that the Knicks bench is that deep. Losing DDV was a big loss now on the preseason. It looked like we have some scorers there off the bench, but there's not a ton of size off the bench until Mitch gets back, which won't be till January. I agree with the Bucks. I don't think those 2, Lillard and Giannis, ever really coexisted well. I don't think they're a great chemistry fit, and they have no bench. So Middleton has been injured off and on, so they have no. I'm not really too worried about the Bucks. The Sixers, if healthy, are a really, really good team. If healthy, history has shown us they are not going to be healthy. Embiid just doesn't stay healthy. Maxey is an amazing player, and he'll likely be healthy. But and also, Paul George, you never know what you're going to get from anymore. So you have that. I do look at a team like the Orlando Magic, which has big guys who can score, as being a team that can come up and do some damage in the playoffs. I don't really see anybody else in the Eastern Conference that could do that. So I do think for the most part, it's Vegas is right. The top 2 in the conference are the Knicks and the Celtics. They're putting the Celtics ahead. I don't think the Celtics are significantly better than the Knicks right now, but the Knicks have to, the Celtics showed it last year. The Knicks haven't shown it yet. So they do have to get to work on, getting that chemistry right and show what they can do.
All right, just to shift gears to the West just for a little bit, you have Minnesota coming off their conference finals appearance last season, now bringing in Randall and DiVincenzo. DiVincenzo will certainly help that team, but what kind of player is Randall going to be in Minnesota? And is Anthony Edwards going to be able to take that even further next step with Randall now on the roster?
Well, it's funny, first of all, DDV is not going to be the player he was last year. Remember, he was a player that he was last year as a result of injuries. He should not be a 40-minute per guy. He was never that before. He was put that out of necessity last time, there were times on the court, he was the only scorer on the court. And so clearly he can shoot well, but he's not the guy you want to be building around. So if he's in that 26 to 28 minute per game range, he'll be fine. He's not the difference maker. Playoff time, a shooter can help, but Randall is great, but I don't think they have any desire to sign Randall long term. So you're gonna have a 1 year kind of thing, and you're probably gonna let him go after that. Randall is a ball dominant guy. So when you have superstars on your team and the guy needs the ball, he's not a catch and shoot guy. He's never been a catch and shoot guy. Even when he does catch and shoot, he holds it for 3 seconds. So that's not his style of basketball. And so I don't know that he will fit on that team anyway. So I'm not expecting that team to be all that. They'll win games, but I don't think they'll be all that dominant in the Western Conference. You're going to have, obviously, OKC is loaded. I mean, just loaded. And not just loaded now. They have the assets to make whatever trade they want at the trade deadline. So if they decide they have a weakness, I mean, our starting center from last year was Ihart, and he's now their bench player. And they signed him to a big contract, and they have loads of draft picks. So they can make whatever move they want to make. Again, they're one injury away, and they're based around a guard. but they have serious, serious height on that team. They run and gun, they can shoot. Like that's a very, very dangerous basketball team.
Yeah, and a question for them is their youth going to be grown up enough this season as we saw them falter against Dallas? So I
Yeah.
think we're looking at the West of Dallas, OKC, and Denver as the class of the West with potentially Minnesota. I know you mentioned Orlando in the East as a sleeper. My sleeper in the West is San Antonio just because of Wembanyama. Do you see a sleeper team in the West?
Well, first of all, the Spurs finished last year really well. I mean, they one, he's a beast. He's just absurd to watch. That one game against the Knicks was one of the best games. I mean, we lost, but unbelievable game. And
I
you
think
you
that was
added,
the game Brunson had like 63 points,
oh,
right?
Richard
Yeah,
went nuts, but
yeah,
Wembanyama was spectacular. And you add Chris Paul, and Chris Paul tends to make players better. Like he's an ass, he's an arrogant whatever, but he tends to make the players around him better, and he'll be phenomenal. And so you have obviously one of the best coaches in the league. So I do think the Spurs can do some damage. They're very, very, very young. They don't really have a third or fourth option yet on that team. So I think they'll win more games than expected. I don't think they're title contenders. I do think the Lakers can always make a run. I mean, when you're sitting on two all-world players that you have, it looks like they hit gold with this draft pick they added,
yeah.
and they have some other late draft picks that they added the last couple of years. So how good is this new coach? You have him in his first year. And quite frankly, you ask yourself a question with the Lakers: is any coach actually the coach of the Lakers, or is
Right.
it really just LeBron James? So, if they put all their stuff together, they have all pro talent on the court. Whether they can do that is a whole other story. And the other team I see people talking about, I don't get it. I don't know if Golden State's going to be actually that good. I don't see where they have very young players that have the top of the draft pick, draft class kind of players that haven't really shown their true colors yet and really shown that ability yet. If they can somehow do it, there's somebody who has a chance. I don't see it happening, but I know that name is being talked about a lot. But
Well, we'll see if Buddy Hield can somehow step into that Klay Thompson role, obviously in very big shoes to fill. But how do you feel about Klay Thompson's arrival in Dallas? I know Klay obviously is a step slower than he has been over the last number of
yeah,
years. Last season definitely emphasized that point. How do you think he'll fit in? Do you think Dallas is a team to look out for in terms of getting back to the finals? Or do you look at the rest of the West catching up to Dallas and Dallas kind of playing catch up?
well, look at the old adage in college basketball, right? The team with the best guard wins. So when you have two all-world guards on your team, you're always going to have a chance. You can make things happen, get to the foul line. And by the Irving is probably, from a pure talent standpoint, probably the top in the league. Just amazing talent. His head is who the hell knows all the time, but has the league. Now the question about Thompson is, okay, so if you weren't playing all that great last year next to Steph Curry, are you suddenly going to be better next to Doncic? Like, why do we believe that a player is going to trade and go back 3 years in time? I don't fully understand that. The Warriors ran this wide open system, which was made for 3 point shooters, and you're shooting opposite the best 3 point shooter in the history of basketball, and you had a down year. So are we going to think that now if we don't have that, we're going to suddenly jump up and we're going to be back to 22 points a game and hitting 43% from the threes? I don't see that happening. So I know that's a big signing for them. I don't see that being a huge difference maker for them. The difference maker for them is they've had some draft picks up front, one that came from the Knicks, by the way, who have performed well. And if that continues, if they're big guys who are not named big guys, but if they continue to perform well and do build on last year, they're going to be formidable. I don't think Thompson is the difference maker. I wouldn't be shocked if by the end of the year he's in the 18 to 20 minutes per game kind of role. I don't see him being, again, if you're with Steph Curry and you can't, get going, why would we think we're going to be able to get going with anybody else? Steph Curry is the greatest shooter in the history of basketball. So,
Yeah, and
um,
Clay is 34 years old,
yeah,
a step slower, and Derek Lively will undoubtedly continue his great progress from last year, his rookie season, kind of filling that Tyson Chandler old school Dallas role there. All right, Steven, what is your extremely early, I won't hold you to it, but I definitely will, NBA Finals prediction for this upcoming season?
well, this is the hard part between what I actually want and usually what I want and what is possible are not anywhere close to each other. Obviously, as a Knicks fan, I like the Knicks to do well. I think there are very few people in the league that have what Brunson has. He has it. He has the thing to carry a team. Um, I don't think Tatum necessarily has that, but I do think what's the other player on Boston?
Jalen Brown.
Jalen Brown. I think Brown has that, and so that's going to be an issue. Now, if everything breaks the right way and the Knicks stay healthy, I think the Knicks can get there. I Part of the reason is because I don't believe in Porzingis. Porzingis will get hurt, injured, he'll fall apart, whatever it is, and now you have somebody in Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns has played games where he shut down Denver, and they're big man, like it was an All NBA, whatever.
Yeah, a
So
very underrated defensive performance
I
last year in the
agree.
playoffs
I
by
absolutely
Towns.
agree, and he's had very good performances against top level centers. So I like our matchup. I do like our front line. I don't love Boston's front line. They have two really good wings, but we now have two all world wings to throw at them. In OG, forget the Knicks' record with OG healthy was absurd. They were spectacular for that time. So I think I do like the Knicks to get there. I think this is a year that they push past. They're too loaded in that front five. I think at the draft deadline, they're going to have to, at the trade deadline, they're going to have to do something to shore up the bench. I'd like to see another big. If Achua comes up big, maybe he ends up lives up to his draft status. Maybe that solves that problem. And then Mitch Robinson coming back, you have kind of an all-team, all-NBA defensive player coming back, which is something that not all teams can boast. Obviously, I go with the guards again. Can Dallas get back there again? Yeah, I don't like Minnesota to get back there. Denver has some losses. They lost some key pieces that were huge, especially defensive.
But Denver signed Russell Westbrook, the key to a winning team.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't know of a team that Russell Westbrook has gone to and gotten better. So
I know that was the point I was
yeah, I
making.
know. I don't know. He'll add excitement to the bench. I mean, there's no question, and the guy still has talent. But I think he's a head case, and that team is been a very good chemistry team for a while now. It's a big gamble for them. So I don't know if my gut tells me the Lakers do something. I think the Lakers are right there. I think you have those two all-world players up front, and you had your guard played great last year. I mean, a lot of things went right for you towards the end of the season. With this coach, with these changes, I think they could be something. They have a rocky start, but I think they're going to finish. There's too much talent on that team.
Right.
And
Well,
I wouldn't be shocked if the NBA had its dream scenario where the Lakers are playing the Knicks. And listen, we have it in the World Series, so why
right.
not do it? Why not do it in the NBA?
All right, I'm going to hold you to it as a long suffering Knicks fan, just like you. I think the Knicks will get to the conference finals against the Celtics, get their hearts broken. We'll all be upset, and I think the NBA will have the Celtics once again in the finals. And in the West, I think the Thunder are going to break through, and I think we're going to have a Thunder Celtics finals.
All right. I think you're probably more like. I mean, obviously, Vegas would agree with you more than with me. I just don't think the Lakers are done. And I think in a full series, if they're playing the way they have to play, I think they could take OKC. But
So let me ask you then, what do you think is the NBA's more dream scenario? A Knicks Lakers finals or a Celtics Lakers finals?
well, you've had the Knicks be bad for so long.
That's true.
So I do think the idea of the Knicks being good and that market being fired up is really good for the NBA. I mean, the Celtics they've been good for a long time. They've won titles recently. The Knicks would be a massive story since '73. And then you just had the Liberty win, so maybe you can break some long streaks here and see the Knicks pull something out.
I don't think Adam Silver or any of his friends would be upset in either scenario if it was Knicks Lakers or Celtics
Nobody's
Lakers.
crying their way to the bank in that one.
Right. All right. Moving on. Steve, you do a great job covering the shoreline, news, politics. Connecticut is not the most covered area for politics in terms of on a year where there's a national election. But what can you tell us about races that are local to the shoreline? I know you're a Brantford guy. I'm in Madison. I know you cover basically the entire shoreline. So what are we looking forward to on election day this year?
Well, this is part of what's not fun about politics because so much of election outcomes in Connecticut, I mean, Connecticut's a blue state and it's not changing. So even though I think Trump could make it a little closer this year, it's not going to be within the realm of any possibility of winning. And so that plays a role. And so when you have a state that has an advantage, especially along the shoreline, Democratic advantage in registration, people tend, as sad as this is, to vote for the party. They don't really look at individual races. So, as much as you have this year Senate races, House races, state legislature races, the average person is this is a presidential year. And they are going to that ballot box. When they're in that line, they're not thinking in terms of who's running for state Senate. They're thinking in terms of who's running for president. So they're a Trumper or they're a Harris person. And unfortunately, many tend to just vote all the way down the ballot. So we do have along the shoreline. Christine Cohen is the state representative. I don't see her having any significant issue winning. The person I've actually endorsed her last week. The person she's running against does not have a ton of experience handling constituent issues, working on local politics, and so Christine's done, I think, a fairly good job there. All the other ones are going to go to Democrats. I mean, there's going to be hard to break through because it's just a registration advantage. Like you have towns like Brantford, which I would say is a more moderate town as a Republican first selectman, but there's a still 2-to-1 registration advantage for Democrats, which is too much to overcome, even if the Republican's significantly better. And I would make the argument this year the Republican is significantly better. You have a Democrat who flipped her car drunk downtown Hartford a year ago, and now she's running for office. And the person was injured, she's being sued, but she's running again and will likely win simply because she has a registration advantage. In Guilford, Maura Rader's a Democrat. She's running against somebody who's not running a campaign. There's no signs. There's no nothing going on there. So and then you have Madison, which could be a close race, but very likely going to the incumbent too. So it's unfortunate. Like we like to think that civic engagement and people vote issues. People really don't vote issues. On a national level, they may to a certain extent, but when it comes to the presidential race, on top of all the other ones, the Democrats in Connecticut just have such a massive advantage. It's really hard for a Republican to switch any of those seats.
Well, you mentioned that you believe that Trump may do a little better overall in the state with his vote share. So based on that, do you believe that that could have an impact on the essentially only competitive national House race in Connecticut, the Johanna Haynes seat in the 5th District?
Yes, but also realize that when the national parties realize a race is going to be close, they're pouring in serious. So when that's money into those races. So Democrats have always said when Democrats vote, they win. That's true. And especially when they have a registration advantage, when they get people out, they win. So that'll be a huge push by the National Party to save that seat. Can it happen? Sure. It could be overcome. He's a good candidate. He's run a good race. And Johanna has some quotes and some things out there that have not been great for her, and they've come back and hurt her a little bit, especially in a year where it tends to, Harris is very left, and there is a significant number of voters who are just not voting left. They could be Democrats, they could be moderates, and they're saying, okay, we're going too far left. Let's push back a little bit. So is there a chance? Yes. Is it likely? No.
Okay. Well, all right. We've touched on the local. Let's get to the national because I think that's where unfortunately, that's where the interest lies for most listeners. Where do you see the race right now, Steve? We're 2 weeks out as of today.
So I will tell you that when Harris was announced as a candidate, I said Trump wins. And there's a very simple reason for that. Like, in order to win, the Dems need big turnout in the cities and to minimize the damage in all the country rural areas, right? And let's just be blunt. Do I see backwoods areas of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, all these states, voting for a black woman when they were leaving a white man? And so there is some race to this, but it's also, what are you comfortable with? We're watching Trump get gains among Spanish populations, minority populations, black populations, which is unheard of. And so I don't know. Now, you had a candidate 4 years ago in Harris who couldn't get the time of day from Democrats, right? She ran, couldn't even get to a primary. They wanted no part of her. She gets on the ballot. Part of that was Black Lives Matter. She gets on the ballot. She's there. Great. It's fine. But no one has any reason to know her well or like her or dislike her. She's just the person who's there. And suddenly she's going to make the difference when Biden, or that switch. So I don't see that happening. And what has happened is we saw her go up in the polls leading up to the announcement, leading up to the convention, and then very quickly started dropping off. And what you saw was Trump was a known entity. In the debate, as bad as his debate was, it didn't matter because we expected Trump to do Trump stuff. like say things that are idiotic and make nonsense, insult people, whatever. That's what he does. He's a known entity. She wasn't a known entity. And the more people are getting to know her, we're seeing the polls come back down to earth because they're not seeing a lot of faith and trust in her ability to do the job. And so, I mean, if you look at Real Clear Politics, who has always a pretty good. They have an aggregate system where they put on, where are these people in the polls. If you look at right now, Harris is up zero point 0.8 on the national polls. Now, what's interesting about that is this exact date, October 22nd, 4 years ago, Biden was up 7.9. 8 years ago, Clinton was up 6.1. So she is coming nowhere close to matching what Biden and Clinton did 8 years ago and 4 years ago. And if we look at Biden being up 8 points, he ended up winning by 4.5 or so. So the polls were off in the Democrats' favor about 3.5 to 4 points. So there is a really good logic here that tells us that he could be up 2 or 3 points if polling is off what it was off 4 years ago and what it was off 8 years ago. And he's also leading aggregate in all these polls in every swing state. And so, I tend to believe, let's ask you this question. The average Republican who doesn't trust government, a stranger calls them on the phone and says, "Who's you're voting for?" They're probably saying something like Mickey Mouse or "Go shove it up your." Like they're probably not sitting there saying, "You know what? I don't trust government. Let me answer some stranger on the phone's question." The Democrats, you had excitement. They couldn't wait to say, "Yes, I'm voting for Harris. Yes, I'm voting for when she was announced." So I think the polls even more so may overestimate the support Democrats have and underestimate the support that Trump has. And I think you're seeing that. You're seeing it in the actions of Harris, of her taking some steps. I mean, she saw her numbers drop among black men, and she came out with a plan to give them all $20,000 to start a business. And that's nice when you start giving people money for votes, but I think that tends to piss off the rest of the world. It says, "Wait a minute, why are you come buy my vote too? I want something for this too." So I don't see a strategy that has made sense. I can't sit here and say I'm a huge Trump fan, but he tends to know. I think the campaign has done a better job of understanding that he was a known entity. Let's just focus on getting our base riled up, and they've done that.
Well, let me ask you, what did you make of the strategy of her campaign? Because it seems like initially, when, as you mentioned, her poll numbers went up, she did a really good job of exciting and shoring up the Democratic base and the voters that were out there saying, "You know what, maybe I'm going to sit out this election," people that voted for Biden that may have a D next to their name in 2020. But for the first few weeks, which seems like a long time ago, but July and August, she didn't really do a lot of media appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a flurry over the last number of weeks. What did you make of her campaign strategy in the beginning, where she kind of was shoring up that Democratic base, didn't really go on the airwaves a lot, and now we've seen a flurry of it lately?
So there's two questions to ask. So the one question is, what are we comparing this to? So she went up in the polls very quickly when she was announced. I would argue that anybody would have gone up in the polls at that point. Like Biden had just had that disastrous performance. He's old. He looks old. As much as he's only a few years older than Trump, he looks about 10 years older than Trump. So anybody, if you had put Gavin Newsom in there, I mean, you're probably going to get this huge boost in polling immediately because they said, okay, it's not Biden. Biden people thought they were going to lose no matter what. So now you have another body in there who could be aggressive. So I don't know that her jump in polling was because it was her or just it was somebody who wasn't Biden. But then you have to look at what the Democrats did with Biden 4 years ago. Late in the race, they put him nowhere. Like there's the joke that he was hiding in a basement somewhere, but he really wasn't on the campaign. They hit him. Why? Because he was likely to say something relatively dumb. Now, is there a double standard? Yes. Trump can say whatever he wants and get away with it. The Democrat is far more analyzed when it comes to what he says. But kind of the same thing happened before. Remember, there was no love for Harris. 4 years ago, in a ton of people running for the presidential nomination on the Democratic side, she couldn't get anything. So there was no real support for her. So there might have been a fear of, right, if we put her out a lot and she comes out and says something not great, or they don't like her laugh, or she's not personable, whatever it is, we could destroy this before it gets started. So I think their mentality was, let's just try to ride the wave. We don't have Biden. We have the excitement because we have somebody new in there, a new hot-blooded person who can give speeches or what have you. Let's minimize getting tough questions, say what we want to say. And remember, the message early on was kumbaya, like we can come together and we can do this. And so I understand why they did it. And now we're seeing more. As she's doing more interviews, we're seeing her drop in the polling. So if she had started doing interviews quickly, like she's announced and then goes on 60 Minutes and goes on NBC, it could be much worse because she has not interviewed well. And the message kept changing. I mean, SNL had a skit the other night where they asked her, what's 1+1? And she said, well, I was born in a middle class family. It's funny, but when SNL's making fun of a Democrat, something's going on. Like something was off. And so they came up the next week. They came back and made fun of Trump more, or made up for a little bit where they actually had her on. But I think the Democrats have a problem in that Harris just isn't the candidate they thought she was going to be, and we knew that. We knew that 4 years ago. It's why Democrats didn't get behind her then, and I think it's just happening. And it's unfortunate for them, but there is a double standard. For Trump could literally say anything. And in some case, look, we have a Democrat locally running who flipped her car over drunk, and she's being nominated. So it happens for some, but Trump is such a known entity. We know we're going to get. We know what's going to happen. We know what he's going to say. We know who he's going to insult. It's kind of funny at points. It's whatever it is, what it is. There's nothing to learn about him. We know it already. When people have one thing they don't know much and one thing they do know a lot about, they're going to go with the certainty. As a wild card as he is, they're going to go with the thing that they know. And I think what's happening is you're seeing more people go with the thing they know, and trust what they see. As crazy it may be at times, no question about it. But nobody likes Harris all that much, and nobody really knows what she is because she's never really she's been all over the place on her stances on almost every issue.
Well, what do you make of the adage of, look, the polling, it doesn't matter. What really matters is the get out the vote effort.
Yep.
And Democrats historically, particularly since 2000, after that contested election, or I shouldn't say contested election, after that election, well, yeah, contested election that went to the Supreme Court, right? Since that time, the Democrats have just outworked organizationally the Republicans in terms of ground game and the get out the vote efforts. So, to go back to my original point, what do you make of the fact that should we just be saying, you know what, the polling data, it's all over the place. 2016, 2020, 2024, there's wild swings. What really matters is the actual votes. But what really matters is how those votes are coming out and the effort on the ground from the Democratic consultants, from the Democratic ground game is bringing out their people, and the Republicans just aren't as organized.
So if you go back to 2000, I think you've had in that time one candidate who was almost transcendental, right? In Obama, you had somebody who was almost higher than the election process. People went to him. Republicans were voting that way, but he was even in two tight races. I miss the days when it was Obama McCain, Obama Romney. We had debates that had issues, and I miss those days. And if Mitt Romney was in a race right now, he'd win by a landslide because he's the only one of logic and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know that they've done just an amazing job. They've always done an amazing job with getting early voting and absentee voting out. And this year, the Republicans have picked up their effort in getting that early vote. So that's a big difference for Republicans. I also think that, at the end of the day, the people who are going to decide the election are not you and me. You and I cover this. We follow this. We know what's going on. We understand the issues. We can explain them back to you. The person who's going to decide this election is not that person. Those people that are going to decide the election are going to vote basically on one or two issues that matter to them where they live. And we could talk about abortion to our blue in the face. We could talk about immigration to our blue in the face. It's the economy, and it's the economy in the areas that they live. So the whole left side of Pennsylvania, once you get out of Philadelphia, fracking. Who do they trust on fracking? You probably know the answer to that. They're going to trust him more on fracking. On oil production, on manufacturing, they're going to generally trust him more in the areas that matter. There's only 5 or 6 states that matter. So the question is, the Democrats went to the well last year, 4 years ago, and had spectacular turnout in Georgia in Pennsylvania, in the states that they needed to. Can they manage to do that again? And even if they do, are those people voting for Harris? Like with Biden, Biden was your safe option. Yeah, Trump, who was a little bit of a loose cannon. Biden is your safe option. Nobody liked him. Nobody like I can't wait to have Joe Biden be president, but he was safe. Where polling is good for me is momentum. If you see a slow shift in one direction, I'm looking at that. The actual number itself, you're right. I'm not looking at that in any huge as an indicator. But I do look at momentum, and momentum the last 3 weeks has been heavily in Trump's favor.
All right. Well, to get your take, we got the 7 swings. We got Arizona,
Yeah.
Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and then the Rust Belt between Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Where do you see Harris strongest? Where do you see Trump strongest?
I so quite frankly, so much of it comes down to Pennsylvania, and I think he wins Pennsylvania. Um, Primarily, fracking is going to be the big issue there. Like she'll get her turnout in Philadelphia, but I think fracking is going to be massive, and I think I think he wins Pennsylvania. If he wins Pennsylvania, it's a very hard road for Harris.
His path
Um,
is Sheeny would need to flip one of those Sun Belt states like North Carolina. His path becomes extraordinarily easier if he wins Pennsylvania.
yeah, I mean, he's going to win. He's winning Georgia. I don't see them. They had a miraculous turnout 4 years ago in Georgia. Then you had that contested Senate race after that. So you just had this a massive number. Um, Arizona is going to be Trump. Wisconsin and Michigan really won't matter much if he takes Pennsylvania. Although it looks like he's ahead of Michigan
He,
too.
he can really just win one of the 3 of the
But
Rust
if you
Belt.
break
Yeah.
that blue wall with Pennsylvania, that's very close to ball game unless there's a shock somewhere else.
Well,
And considering they're both spending all their time in Pennsylvania, they've been like a ton of time in Pennsylvania. I'm not expecting a huge shock. The parties cannot be looking at, oh look, we can flip something else.
hmm.
So, everybody says it's going to be a long week after election night, and may not know the results. If you have Pennsylvania by 11 o'clock, you probably have the ball game. It may be over at that point. Um, I mean, based on how polling has gone in the past, she would have to be up 2 to 3 points in most of these swing states to be about even. And she's down in aggregate in the swing states. That's a problem.
Well, so I think I know the answer to this then. And based on the fact that you believe Trump is going to win Pennsylvania, we're 2 weeks out. Do you who do you expect to win? I think I know the answer to that, but I'll let you say it. Who
Mm-hmm.
do you expect to win? And do you think we'll know on election night?
I think Trump wins, and I think we'll know on election night. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be. Now, you do have some changes where some states are requiring ballot, but hand counts or whatever it is. That may be the case, but Pennsylvania is not one of those. And in Pennsylvania, we may have that number quickly. If I take what's happened the last 2 presidential election cycles and look at the polling with a grain of salt and how much they have been off, if we just bring that over to this year, he's already up by a significant margin. I don't see how she gets the vote out. There's simply you did this 4 years ago. You did it 4 years ago, promising people, hey, you're not going to have to pay for your student loans. Well, that was a lie. You promised them it's going to get better. Inflation went way up. So that person saying, you know what, I showed up 4 years ago for Biden. All the fear I bought into, he's the end of the world. Trump's going to destroy everything. Okay, fine. And I'm not taking a stance on the issues, just politically and the way people think politically. Are they really going to show up again and vote for Harris? And I just don't see it. And in states where you might come down to 10, 20, 30,000 people, which is a minuscule number in an election, that amount of people not showing up swings the vote.
I mean, you look
And
at Wisconsin from
yeah,
2016, right? You had Trump and Hillary. That was decided by just pulling it up. That was decided by 0.77%,
yeah,
right? He won that state by 1.4 million to 1.38 million. So I can't do that math in my head, but that's not
yeah.
a lot. And then in 2020, Biden won the state by, I think, under 10,000 votes. So we are talking about on the margins. And that's why, because we're looking at this on the margins, that's why my thinking is this is just about who is it going to be able to get out their voters?
Well, let's look at look at polling on this date, and I've just picked this up on Real Clear Politics. Biden on October 22nd, 4 years ago, led in the average on Real Clear Politics in Wisconsin by 4.6.
Yeah.
Hillary led by 6.5. Trump leads by 0.4. So you're telling me how close those margins were when Biden was
Right.
going in 2 weeks out with a 4.6 point lead. He ended up winning by what? Less than a point?
But is it safe for us to make assumptions? And obviously, this is what we do, what we look
Yeah,
at.
there's no such thing as safe, but yeah.
Right. But is it dangerous to make the assumption that, oh, the polling was off in 16 and 20, therefore it's going to be off in 24? Because we also have 22. The polling was wildly off in
Yeah.
22 and underestimated Democrat support. So I think we just don't know, and we're starting to see little indications of it with the early vote, but we just don't know what the electorate is going to look like yet. And once we have a better idea of what the electorate is, and we may know that next week with some of the early vote, then I think we'll really see and can understand trends.
Well, listen, you're going to find out that 70% of the early votes Democrats. I mean, won't showing up. That's always going to be the case. If 30% of it is Republicans, that's actually higher than they've been in some past elections. So I don't know. I go back. There's the myth of the undecided voter. I don't know if there's a whole lot of undecided voters left. I think people have made up their mind. I think that if they're going to vote, they're going to show up. I go by a couple old adages. Seniors tend to vote higher and a higher percentage, and they're going to vote more Trump than Harris. Younger
And that
people,
was Biden's best. That was Biden's best demographic was
yes,
voters over the age of 65.
and I don't see it happening for Harris. That's just my gut feeling and basically what the numbers show. People who tend to show up less are kids, that young, 30 and under kind of group. And they're also the kids who've been protesting against the Biden administration over Palestine and Israel and all this other stuff. So many of them may throw their vote. They may give it to somebody else. I don't see where that same sort of energy that we saw 4 years ago. 4 years ago, it was, we hate Trump. We have somebody safe. Let's make this happen. I'm not seeing the same we hate Trump rhetoric. And I'm also not seeing that Harris is considered as safe as Biden was.
Hmm.
And two of those things go in the opposite direction of the Democratic Party right now. So listen, and her campaign is acting as if they're worried. Like they're doing things, they're coming up with, who comes up with policy 2 weeks out? Here's a new policy. Here's $20,000 for every black man to start a business. That's an odd thing. That reeks of desperation. That tells me what's going on within their own camp. I think the Republican side has basically said for the last 2 months, if we get our base, the Democrats can't match it this year. And they might be right. And listen, it goes back to Clinton. It's about the economy. And, no matter what the numbers tell you, people are paying a lot more for things in the grocery store now than they ever did before. And that lingers.
Well, Steve, we will leave it at that for now. Of course, I will give you the floor to self-promote yourself and all of your endeavors. Go ahead.
There's not much to self promote. What I want to say is go Knicks tonight. You're playing the Celtics. It's their banner night. So ruin it for me. I'd really appreciate that. I'm going to do this podcast. I have my own podcast at 4 o'clock. If you are a fan of mine or listening on Facebook, Brantford7.com. My website is StevenMazzacane.com. But I'm going to do my podcast at 4, which we're mostly going to talk about a school fight that happened in Brantford, Connecticut. Hit the gym and then be on my ass on the couch by 7 o'clock, where hopefully the Knicks can start their season on a good note. I hope we're both pretty happy in a few months when the Knicks are playing the Lakers in the finals.
All right. Well, Steve, I will certainly be texting you this evening. Hopefully we will get this up online before the Knicks game. But otherwise, I hope to have you back. Maybe we'll talk one more time before the election.
All right, Cliff, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.